Here are the 6 things I wish I had known before I started Pokemon collecting. So Pokemon collecting is incredibly fun, but believe it or not, there's a very steep learning curve. For one, it's expensive, and 2, there are so many different ways to collect, from sealed, graded, to vintage, to modern, to Japanese and Korean sets. The list goes on and on. I suppose the point of this video is to try and provide like a walkthrough of some of the lessons I've learned, and hopefully to help anyone who's gone through the same things. Hopefully that both newbies and experienced collectors can take some solid advice from this. So to kick off, the number one thing is to learn to stick to your era. Avoid chasing older sets which have now become insanely expensive. Every era is special, and sometimes you can fall into the trap of thinking, oh, the previous generation was better. And this usually happens because you've got now the proof that the era climbed in value. So you assume it was better. But really, each era has its unique characteristics that need to be appreciated. Usually, this is only realized once it passes. Collecting can honestly feel like a tunnel, but really the wheel just keeps on spinning. New sets are always coming, and whatever you miss, you'll be able to find in another set. So let's say if you missed out on a booster box like Evolving Skies, and it's entirely out of your budget. Don't overextend yourself. Rather than trying to catch up on older sets that have already climbed in value, focus on the present, because these sets will also one day experience the same good fortune. If you missed out on Sun and Moon, invest in the present era. Learn to become part of that era rather than trying to chase what's happened. Honestly, hindsight is always 20/20, and it can sometimes feel like Scarlet and Violet will never reach Sun and Moon levels. But believe me, if there's one thing I've learned about collecting, it's that things tend to rise as they get older. One day, believe it or not, today's sets will also become old, and they'll also become valuable. So appreciate your era, because it will one day leave and you will miss it no matter how much you think otherwise. Number 2 is the second point, is that grading matters. However, the company you grade with matters more. Card grading isn't just about assessing the quality of your cards. It's also about the legitimacy of the company that is grading your card. The company needs to be reputable and have plenty of experience. One, to ensure that your cards are actually being graded properly. But number 2, they need to have some sort of social proof to back them in. When it comes to grading your cards, or buying graded cards for that matter, there are only really 3 companies you should go with: PSA, BGS, Beckett Grading Service, or CGC, Certified Guarantee Company. There are other smaller companies, and I'm sure they're good, but when it comes to selling, you're gonna widen your buyer market and you'll get a much better price by sticking with the 3 I mentioned. As much as grading gets criticized, the reality is it's a great way to measure and protect your cards. Alright, number 3 is you can't collect everything. Choose your niche and stick with it. With Pokemon, there's a lot of areas to collect. Some people love vintage, there's Japanese cards, there's alt arts, there's ETB collecting, there's PSA 10 collecting. People love collecting master sets. Some people collect miscut or error cards. The list literally goes on and on. It's essential to stick with what you love. Collecting is what you love. Investing, that's a completely different story, and I've got some videos on that if you're interested, but investing has to become a bit more strategic. However, just stick with your niche. Enjoy what you collect. Don't try and grab everything. You're gonna burn out. Number 4 is that card singles drop a year after release. Wait a year before you buy singles from a new set. Honestly, this is the advice I wish someone told me. If you took a spreadsheet and measured every card from release date, nearly all would have seen a very steady decline 1 year after the release of a set. There was a few outliers in the Sword and Shield era, and everyone became obsessed with buying singles at release because they just kept rising. However, this was a totally wild era, and it was a complete exception, not the rule. I love collecting a year out from release. Usually you get the best prices, and there's heaps of graded singles on the market, giving me a good idea of the popularity of cards and sets. If you wait longer than a year, sometimes it can backfire. So I usually think a year is that perfect point where people have kind of moved on from the set, but it's still not too nostalgic for people to be paying or overpaying for it yet. Number 5, this is a big one. Do not cheap out on binders. Never buy a cheap binder. Cards slip out. You'll store them and they'll get whitening because they move. Every time you flip through the pages, they'll move. Each time they move, they will slowly get damaged. If over the course of 3 years, you flick through your binder 100 times, that's 100 times that the edges of the cards have been moved in the side, getting slightly damaged. I honestly suggest buying a top-loader binder. This allows you to place all your protected top-loaded cards inside a binder. This is my personal favorite way to store raw cards. And feel free to ask me if you want any brand recommendations. And number 6, if collecting sealed, buy from reputable sellers. Sealed is a tricky game because it's very much dependent on who you buy from. I personally only buy sealed from local card stores and very reputable sellers. Be very careful when trying to bargain hunt on sealed. Unfortunately, there's a lot of tricksters and people who reseal packs, but thankfully, if you open the pack, it's very easy to tell if it was resealed. Personally, this has never happened to me, but it's becoming a much more bigger problem for older and vintage sets. But trust me, you only want to buy your sealed from reputable places. Even if you have to pay a bit more, always do it. Just think of it as an insurance. This also leads me to another point. If collecting or investing in sealed product, make sure you're working on your own online reputation because sealed is a very tricky market that requires a lot of trust. However, if you do have a lot of trust on your selling accounts, you can actually get very good prices for your sealed collection later down the line because sealed collectors are very, very particular who they buy from. I love collecting sealed, but I am super particular who I buy from. Now, if buying newer sets, just buy them from card stores. If buying older and vintage sets, ensure that you have researched the seller. Do not try and save $1 on sealed. The margins for error are way too thin. And that's really all there is, guys. I really hope you enjoyed the video, and if it helped you out, feel free to like and comment. And as always, if you got value out of the video, hit that subscribe button and I'll see you on the channel. Thanks, guys. Cheers.